Hello, hello, hello. Happy New Year and welcome to 2020. Hey, Jesse, how's it going?
What's up, man? I'm still filling out all the forms 2019. I haven't gotten quite used to 2020 yet.
Do you know I learned a fun fact that our listeners should actually know too? You should never abbreviate when you're writing a date on anything that's legal as /20 because people can then backdate things. There was a whole thing that I was reading and I was fascinated that you should always fill it out 2020 instead of just 20. So free advice, just make sure that you write the whole 2020 out.
I'm trying to think of a scenario that I would need to be worried about. I guess maybe writing checks.
Potentially. Yeah.
Good to know.
Excellent. Anyway, so welcome back to the Journey NYC podcast. We are back here in 2020. I'm super excited.
We are here.
We have had a huge start in 2019, and this year we're starting off with someone super exciting.
Yes. Cassidy Krug.
Cassidy Krug. We are talking to an Olympian, and I am super excited. Cassidy, welcome to the Journey NYC podcast.
Hello, thank you.
How's it going?
It's going really good.
It's so exciting. I've never met anyone with the title of Olympian, so...
Neither have I. Very cool.
You're the first!
That's me. That's
amazing.
So great.
So, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, you were at the 2012 London Olympics.
I was, yes.
Strangely enough, I was actually living in London at the time, or getting ready to move to London.
Oh, man.
During that time. So
maybe we met. Maybe we met in a past
quite possibly. In
London
fact,
Olympic life.
What was interesting is I actually did go to the Olympic Village, and I got to see, because we were looking at techno gyms, the way they kit out the whole gym there and everything. We got a whole tour of the apartments complexes that they built and everything. So it was really a neat experience. And so that to now meet someone who had actually been there as an athlete and a representative is kind of cool.
I did not know that. I remember when we all went through and saw the techno gym stuff for the first time, and we all went and tried out every kind of new machine we weren't familiar with. So we had the same experience, maybe not exactly at the same time, but close.
It was really neat. The rep took us through. They showed us the way the monitors work. Anyway, I digress. The Olympic Village is really, really interesting, and it was a very cool experience there. Cassidy, you are an Olympian.
I am.
Please do tell us about this journey on what it takes to become an Olympian, because I think in general is the world sees Olympians in a specific way, but they don't see the journey to get there.
Right. So my journey to becoming an Olympian started very young. My parents are both diving coaches.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
Both of them.
Both of them. Yeah. So my dad was the coach at University of Pittsburgh for a long, long, long time. And my mom coached the club team there. My dad was a diver himself at the Olympic trials. So you could almost say it was fate. I actually have a younger brother who hated diving and wanted nothing to do with it. So we didn't have to, but it was certainly available.
Okay.
I went to my first diving meet, rumors have it, when I was a week old.
Wow.
Yeah. My mom brought me on the pool deck. She was a baller. She was just carrying me around anywhere. There's silly videos of me at age 4 probably, on the pool deck of a big international meet. And I have my little watercolors and I have my little paintbrush, and I just walk right up to in front of the judges and start painting. I just hung out around a pool as I was growing up.
And you were a baller too from the very beginning. Judges didn't intimidate you, obviously.
I don't think I knew exactly who I was sitting in front of, and I think I was then kind of picked up and moved to the side. But it was kind of the greatest possible playground to grow up in. You have water, you have diving boards, you have trampolines. It was so fun. That is so cool. Yeah.
And you took to the water right away?
I did, yeah. Growing up at a pool, my mom taught me how to swim pretty early. Yeah. But I actually, I did not want to be a diver until much later. When I was 3, that was the 1988 Olympics were on TV. And I can still almost remember them, I think. It's a long time ago. But apparently I was so enthralled by Gymnastics on TV at the 1988 Olympics that my mom and dad then put me in gymnastics classes when I was 3 years old.
Which is kind of analogous, right? I mean, you have a lot of tumbling, spinning, jumping.
Totally. Yeah. The stuff you do in the air is almost exactly the same. Like you have to know kind of which way is up, which way is down,
right,
how to spin through the air. The way you get into it and the way you get out of it is quite different.
For sure.
Prefer not to land on your head in gymnastics or on your feet in diving.
Yeah.
That is true.
Yeah.
Very opposite. Never even thought about that.
So you're in gymnastics?
Yeah. So I was in gymnastics when I was a kid. I pursued that pretty intensely until I was around 15. My parents were, I will say, like the best possible coach parents you could have. They were super supportive of gymnastics, of diving, of anything else I could want to do. It was always my choice. They were awesome. And until I was 15, I really chose gymnastics over diving.
Mm-hmm.
I did both as I was getting into, I guess, my middle school and high school years. And then I think there was one summer when...
Wow. That's commitment.
Yeah, it was fun, but it was intense. You know, I think the last summer I did both. I would do 2 diving practices in the morning. And then like nap or something.
What time do you have to get up to do 2 diving practices?
Oh man, let me try to remember the schedule. It was probably like maybe like a 9 to 11, and then a 1 to 3:30, and then some sort of nap or snack, and then 4 hours of gymnastics at night.
Wow. So all day, basically.
All day, yeah. And I think it was after that summer that it was kind of like, well, something probably should give at this point. When I was 15, I was investing a lot more time in gymnastics, but not getting better at quite the same rate. And I was investing a lot less time in diving, and I was getting better a lot quicker. Plus, landing in water tends to be a lot easier on your body than landing on the ground.
Yeah.
And so I kind of made that choice to prioritize diving.
That's amazing.
15.
So you're 15 when you decided to become... Well, I guess you're not professional at that point, but that's when you're specializing as a diver.
Yeah, definitely. And everyone has different journeys. It's kind of a testament. Like a lot of times, if you start in gymnastics and you start that intently, like there really is no room for anything else.
Yeah.
And my gymnastics coach, my parents, like everybody wanted to sort of help me make this possible to do both and to try both for a long time.
Well, and to get to that Olympic level too is Olympic gymnasts are that 14, 15, like they're 12, 13, 14, 15. Whereas, and I'm not sure, what is the general age range for divers?
Divers tend to range quite a bit more than gymnasts. I would say divers, you see kind of up-and-comers that are 16 or so in the Olympics, but you can still see people that are sort of in their 30s. One of my favorite divers ever, Laura Wilkinson, is in her 40s, and she's working on a comeback right now.
That's amazing.
For the 2020 Olympic team.
That's
so
cool.
She's awesome and extreme and like such a badass. But there tends to be more range in diving. For gymnastics, it helps to be so small and muscular and compact, and often for women especially, puberty doesn't really help that.
Yeah.
And furthermore, it all of that pounding on the ground, all of those years tends to result in injuries. So I think divers tend to have a little bit of a longer lifespan than gymnasts do.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I've heard of a ton of gymnasts that arthritis hits in very early, ankle replacements, knee replacements, hip replacements, etc.
Yeah, it's an awesome sport, but it can be kind of a brutal sport too.
Yeah.
I would absolutely, I loved it. If I ever have a kid, I would absolutely, if they wanted to, put them in it. But doing it for a long time, you beat up on your joints.
As a former dancer, I know that.
Right.
Jesse gets to hear about all my aches and pains about my back.
Right.
Yeah, I see the flip side too. I know a lot of people that did gymnastics as a kid, and they have like such a better range of motion and flexibility. Than somebody like me who has the flexibility of like a 90-year-old that never did any kind of gymnastics. So it seems like there's good benefit to it to a point.
I just want to appreciate your pun with on the flip side just now. I
Oh
really
yeah,
liked that.
no pun intended. Yeah.
But yeah, like it trains you to be flexible, it trains you to be strong, it trains you to be disciplined. It's really an awesome sport. And actually so many divers end up having done gymnastics beforehand and then transitioning. The other thing that's cool about diving is actually a little bit of weight is helpful, especially in springboard, where, you know, if you can push
Momentum.
the board down, then it can throw you back up again. And so actually having that sort of rhythm is not necessarily a bad thing in diving, which is
That's
great.
so cool.
Yeah.
So you're at 15, you decided to focus on diving. And at one point, did you start to say like, hey, maybe, I mean, it's a big dream to have, but like maybe the Olympics could be something for me and I could potentially get there. At what point did you start really setting your sights on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's answered one way. The Olympics was a dream from when I was 3 and I started watching the 1988 Olympics on TV.
Okay.
But over time and over sort of the steps that I took in my career, that dream became closer and closer and closer to something that I actually could see myself doing, that could actually become a reality. So
when you started diving, was it kind of clear from the beginning you were just excelling beyond your peers?
I don't know. You know, I guess when I think of kind of what I had, what I naturally sort of brought to the table, I had good genes. Both of my parents are super athletic. And so as a diver, even as a diver training to the Olympics, I was relatively strong. Like I could jump pretty high. I could spin pretty fast. And I think that might have been something that was sort of visible early on. Things that I wasn't so good at and had to work a lot harder at. I was not super consistent. Like there was a long time when I was maybe the strongest diver in the pool, but also the most likely to get last because I was like a windshield wiper. You know, I was like sometimes straight up and down, sometimes on my face, sometimes on my back. Like I hadn't
mastered consistency.
Hadn't necessarily trained for consistency as much as I ultimately needed to, wasn't quite as kinesthetic as a lot of divers are. You know, I'm pretty good in the air, but there are some people you could probably like blindfold them, like put them in a bag, shake it up, throw it off of something, and they would know which way was up and how to land on their heads.
Wow.
And other people were very good visual spotters. Like in diving, the way that you really fine tune and make your dives precise is by using your eyes. And it's a little bit like in dance, I would imagine, where you pick up a spot. You do a somersault, you try to pick up that same spot. You do a somersault, you try to pick up that same spot. And that tells you, you know, where to put your feet, where to put your hands, and how exactly to be vertical. And it took me a while to like train my eyes to be able to do that.
To spot, yeah.
So that's so counter to what I would assume because you're moving so quickly. How could your eyes ever keep up with that level of like stimulus? I feel like
you have to. That's why you have to pick one spot. Like if you are moving that quickly and you're trying to see everything, there's absolutely no way.
Right.
I mean, unless maybe there are some genius people that can do it, but there's almost no way that you can see everything. So you really have to focus it on one specific pinpoint.
It's interesting too because as a dancer, we spot by turning your head. And you keep whipping around and coming back to a spot.
So you don't get sick
for dancers
too, right?
and for gymnasts, and it sounds like from divers, you don't really, your head doesn't turn. With dancers, if you watch pirouettes and everything, they're constantly focused on one spot, but their body rotates and their head whips at the very last minute to spot.
Skaters do that too.
Yeah.
I thought that was so you didn't get dizzy, like spinning around.
That's a definite side benefit.
Yeah.
Knowing what you're looking at certainly helps not getting dizzy too.
Yeah.
So actually there are divers that do both. I always try to keep my head very still, neutral, just pick it up when it comes around. There are some that have mastered it so well that they can kind of track it.
Yeah.
And they do move a little bit.
Okay.
But in any case, it's very helpful to be able to use your eyes in a really disciplined way in order to know exactly how to come out, land on your head, and sort of rip the entry with no splash. And in my early days as a diver, I was not so good at that.
So when you started on gearing towards the Olympics, obviously that had to become your number one priority, right? Did that become your number one priority?
Yes and no.
Okay.
So
Wait, how old are you at this point?
yes, I'll give a little bit of a from 15 to then. So 15, quit gymnastics, focused on diving. Diving through the rest of high school was not my number one priority at all. It was, it was school, it was friends, it was diving, it was whatever. And like I said, my parents were great at helping me keep it in a box that was fun,
Okay.
and making sure that like I loved the sport. Like they developed this love of the sport, which I mean, I knew a lot of Olympians. I knew a lot of very successful people that didn't love what they did.
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think being able to get into it a little more gradually and a little bit more on my terms meant that I continued to love what I did as long as I did it. So, fast forward, I guess, to the end of high school. And I decided to go to Stanford for college. I dove with Rick Schiavone there. He's, this legendary coach.
Cool.
I briefly considered sticking around at University of Pittsburgh to dive with my dad. And at that point, I decided that I need someone that would push me harder than my parents would, and that he kind of played that role. And I would say, in talking about the Olympics as sort of this far off dream to talking about the Olympics as something that could actually happen, my freshman year of college was the moment that I was like, this could actually be a thing.
Cool.
Yeah. And it was a culmination of things. It was starting to train with Rick and taking all of that strength and all of that sort of untapped potential and really starting to hone it into something that could do the polished dives that you need to do in order to get good scores. It was it was the first time I'd actually ever worked in a weight room. So I was actually starting to do weights, and again, had always been strong, but this like kind of took me to the next level there.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then
just out of curiosity, like in terms of the weightlifting, did you have people having you do like dive, like mimicking diving, or were you just doing like classic weight training? Were you squatting, deadlifting, that kind of thing?
I mean, so over the course of, I'm going to say 9 years of doing weight training for diving, I did a lot of all of those things. I would say it was a combination of both. It was a lot of squatting. First on a squat machine, then kind of Olympic lifting. You need strong legs to jump high. Yeah. And explosive. And it was a lot of abs and core. Because the faster you can go from a straight position to a very small position and then come back out in a controlled way, the better. So that's core. It was upper body strength, a little bit less, but still super important because you're landing on your head and it's almost a safety thing. Like you need to have the stability up here to be able to like hit the water and not have the water take your
breath away,
limbs, and breath away. And then there were some things we did we did a lot of plyos. We did a lot of like one-legged type plyos. Cause if you think of like a diver's approach down the diving board, there's a lot of one-legged stuff you do. So yeah, I mean, it was a combination of things.
Very cool.
That is neat. I would have never thought that.
Yeah, it was fun. And I worked with a strength coach. I worked with a bunch of different strength coaches, but one of the ones I worked with the most, this guy named Jason Kwan, he really was cool in that we were kind of inventing together the right exercises to help me with exactly the type of strength that I needed, which was really fun.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you're in college now.
Yeah.
And how many years of you working with this new coach did it take for you to really hone that raw talent and get to where the Olympics happened?
I mean, in some respects, like after 1 year, I really, really saw a difference. In other respects, if I was still training now, I'd still be trying to hone that raw talent.
Sure.
It's like the journey is in that way a never-ending journey, and that like
I can always be better.
You don't ever really reach perfection.
Sure. Yes.
So my freshman year of college, in addition to sort of the NC2A meets, there's sort of the U.S. Olympic kind of circuit of meets. And I would say at the beginning of the year, I would not have imagined myself going to Olympic trials, which would have been 2004 Olympic trials at the end of the year. But with that training and with that honing, I was able to do, well enough at U.S. Nationals to qualify on to the next meet, well enough at the next meet to qualify on to the next meet. And ultimately, I made it to the Olympic trials, and I did well enough at the Olympic trials to final.
Wow.
And I can't remember what place I got. I think I might have got 8th
Okay.
at the Olympic trials, when at the beginning of that year, it would not even have been
Possible.
on my radar.
Amazing.
And that was one of the moments when I was really like, oh my gosh, like this sort of, it's not like it snuck up on me. I'd been working hard for it, but like it was an epiphany of like, this is a faraway dream to this is something that I really should and can work for. And then I got this other cool opportunity to actually go to the 2004 Olympics. My parents, in addition to being diving coaches, have worked at all of the Olympics since 1984.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
It was pretty sweet. And my mom is a statistician and sort of biographer in that capacity. And so she would go to the pool deck, interview all the athletes, kind of compile bios on all the athletes, and then sit with the commentators and sort of feed that information to them. And so they got me this gig, so I was able to go too.
That's cool.
Yeah, and just sitting in the stands watching the Olympics and being like, I could beat some of these people, was another epiphany. So I would say like many epiphanies in a very short span my freshman year of college.
Wow. And I mean, college for most kids is a time to socialize and maybe do a little bit of schoolwork. But, I feel like the classic approach to college is making friends and going to parties and things like that. How was your experience of college different from, would you say, like the average person's kind of approach?
It was probably a bit more focused than the average person's approach. So one thing Rick maintained and believed in and kind of made us believe in too was that you could have diving first and school first. And he pushed it. It was kind of his philosophy, and it's something that I believe I was able to do. Both like commit as much as I could and kind of my heart and soul to diving, while also making the most of my education there, and like, taking the opportunities that come from being able to go to Stanford and getting my English and creative writing degree. So there were definitely times when diving took the front seat or school took the front seat. And there were definitely moments like, I wasn't partying every night. Like I was, there was a moment freshman year when I was like, oh, it'd be so cool to join, Taiko. And then I was like, no, I can't do that. So it definitely was a more streamlined experience probably than a lot of people, but it did leave me with something that I still believe in and that still really like affects my life to this day, which is this sense of balance, and of the ability and almost the necessity to have multiple things in my life that matter at one time.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's a little bit, so that's cool, because I always think of somebody that reaches the pinnacle of whatever their pursuit is as like having done that at the expense of so many other things. But it sounds like you were able to keep a pretty balanced life.
Yeah, I mean, it was. And I think it was at the expense of some other things.
Sure.
I wasn't partying as much, or probably, devoting as much time to my friends as others do. But I do think I was able to keep it balanced. And I actually sometimes wonder, I feel like I was among the most balanced of my peers of my Olympic peers in a lot of ways. And I sometimes wonder if I had really like, if the Olympics had been the only thing that mattered, if I maybe would have gone farther. I don't know. Yeah. But I think for me, it was the only way to do it and make it worth it and love it and stay sane at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder if you had done that, what kind of repercussions that has. It seems like when you're going that you're making like small percentages and increases in your ability for diving, but to make those at that level, right, you're making such big sacrifices in other aspects of your life to just get that, because it's really at that point, so like almost a game of inches, so to speak, not to use a cliche, but
it's true. I use that cliche all the time because I think it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do, like, there were times in my career, over the summers when I wasn't in school, or I kept diving for 5 years after I graduated, when I wasn't doing anything else. I didn't have school, I didn't have work, and I was just diving. And, like, I was an insane person during those times.
Really?
The little changes, like the incremental good practices, bad practices, like something I did 5 times and wasn't able to improve at all, those had such an outsized impact on me. I knew I would go home and I would stew over things. I would think about them. Like it, in the times of my life when my perspective really narrowed, I don't know. It definitely wasn't the most enjoyable times I had training. And, maybe during those times I did make more progress. I don't know. But it certainly wasn't when I felt the most stable.
Right. And so so it was after you graduated college, you were just pretty much diving all the time. That was it.
Nope.
Oh, okay.
Graduated college. And let's see, I graduated in 2007, and the goal was at that time, give it a year, try to make the 2008 Olympic team, and then retire.
Okay.
Either way, I was like, the world is big. I'm going to give this one more year, really focus on it. And then I'm going to go on and do whatever my next thing is supposed to be.
Yeah.
Life had other plans. I hurt myself in February of that year.
Oh no.
Yeah, I was on my way to the Olympic test event, which was in Beijing.
Yeah.
And I had been having kind of neck problems. And I did something stupid, which was I got right off of a plane and basically went to the pool and did a lot of diving, which isn't great when you've got like some vertebrae that are unhappy.
Yeah.
So I did that. I remember like we were in a practice. It was kind of our first time. Like we were like super jazzed, and I threw my arms forward for a dive, and then I just felt this burning sensation all the way down my right arm.
Nerves.
Yeah, and it took me a while because I hadn't felt that before. But absolutely, it was a nerve. It was something in my C5, C6 vertebrae. I pinched a nerve. It was super weak. And so it was like I'd try to hold my arm up and someone would try to press it down. It would just fall down like water.
Wow.
And the annoying thing about nerves is that really one of the only ways to fix them is just to chill and not do anything, which is the worst thing to have to do when you're trying to get ready for Olympic trials in June and you've hurt yourself in February. I had that injury. I had to take a significant amount of time off.
Sure.
I really didn't have enough training under my belt to compete well.
Yeah.
And I did not make the 2008 Olympic team.
Okay. How did that make you feel though, knowing that was originally the goal and life dealt you a different hand? Yeah.
Well, being a goal-oriented person, I did what I had planned to do, and I retired. And and that it was awful, and at the same time freeing, and I really expected that was it, and it was time to go like do my second life now. And then about 9 months into my second life, I had gotten a job at the Stanford Alumni Association, which like just happened to be a 5-minute walk away from the pool. So I was 9 months into that. The working world was not all that I had dreamed that it would be.
Sure.
No.
Really?
I mean, so I went to Stanford and I saw my peers all like going off and getting these jobs and making money and like all kinds of cool things. And then I got to it myself and was like, wait a second, this is not exactly what I thought it would be. And then I ended up going back to diving because I felt like I had unfinished business.
That's awesome.
I'm glad I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you missed the Olympic team in 2008. Did you help your mother at at that?
I did
Olympics
not
as
go to
well?
that Olympics.
Okay.
I was not ready
Mentally for it.
mentally to go and watch the Olympics that I really wanted to be at.
Mm.
So I was home. I remember watching my event, women's 3-meter springboard, on TV and like kind of tearing up. And even then, like, it never occurred to me to keep diving. I was like, well, it's the plan. I'm done now. I'm going to go do other things. And but it was not making the 2004 Olympics, like, whatever. I didn't even think I was going to make the trials. But not making the 2008 Olympics was like
Hard.
a big blow. And it was also, in my like weird structure, the only chance that I had to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so no, I did not go to that one.
And then life threw in another joker, which became 2012.
Yeah.
So how did that? Okay, 2008 doesn't happen.
Yeah.
At some point, there's a spark that starts again.
Yes.
At what point do you decide, all right, so this didn't happen, but there's this to aim for?
Yeah. Well, so having happened to get a job that was right next to the pool, it was fairly easy to just stop by the pool every once in a while and do my conditioning and maybe bounce around on the board and just, dive into the water a couple times to see how it still felt. And I realized, how much I loved it. Yeah. It's funny when you're used to doing a particular activity or you train a particular activity to the level that I did, just the pure joy of feeling that again when you haven't done it in a while is so, it shouldn't be surprising, but it kind of is.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like the actual feeling of doing a somersault, landing on my head in the water and going through the water. And I was like, wow, I really love this feeling. And I think it took, going away for 9 months for me to realize
Sure.
that I loved it that much. And so it was the combination of kind of loving that feeling of knowing like I wanted to make an Olympic team, and I'm still like physically capable. I still have time. Like, why not?
Mm-hmm.
So I started training again. And at first it was very low key. It was just sort of like, I'll do this to keep in shape and
Sure.
I'll get used to it again. And then it gradually got a little more intense. And then my coach was like, what if we tried to, go to nationals this year? And I was like, okay.
Same coach?
Same coach.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's
same
cool.
coach. And then, so if 2008 was the Olympics, by 2009, I started training again. And by kind of like mid to late 2009, I was kind of right back into the diving life while still working at the Stanford Alumni Association, which was great. I think I went down to 75% time or so there. And I was super lucky to have that balance. And my schedule was nuts. It was like, I think like 7:30 to 9 or so at the pool, and then go over to the Alumni Association and work maybe like 9:30 to like 12:30, and then maybe 1 to 4 at the pool again, and then back to the Alumni Association for like a couple more hours of work, and then to the weight room or to Pilates or, to stretch, and then home at night.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a 16-hour day.
Basically, yeah. A nicely balanced between physical and desk 16-hour day, but a 16-hour day.
And then we get to 2012.
Yes.
So at that point, you're going to go through the trials again to see if you can get to the Olympic team.
Yeah.
What does it take to get invited to like the trials? Like,
Not
what
much,
do you have to do?
I don't think. Right? You don't have to do much.
Yeah, you just show up.
You show up. Yeah.
They put your name in a hat. They pick it
It's
out.
a lot easier than people think.
Cool.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I would recommend everybody try to go to
it's a good time.
go compete in Olympic trials at least once. No, it takes a bit. So every year or every quadrennium, it's a little bit different. But for me, you had to place well enough at one of several different competitions throughout that year. And so say if you make the finals at nationals, then you get invited to trials. Or if you happen to, do well at an international meet, you get invited to trials. So there are a couple ways in. But I made it to trials, and I was there were like 4 or 5 of us in my event, women's 3-meter springboard, who were really good, who were like up there. And I was probably the best physically, but I was a little inconsistent mentally.
Sure.
Like, that was the thing that I needed to conquer at the Olympic trials in order to make it to the Olympic team.
Yeah.
You know, I knew lots of my fellow competitors who would like look like trash in practice. Like they would like be all over the place, and they would be, you know, not landing on their heads and bulking and whatever. And then they would get to the competition and they would get fired up and they would do so well.
Yeah.
Which was frustrating sometimes. But I was not one of those people. I was always winning practice and then like doing something silly in a competition.
You know what's really interesting is for a long time I followed Tom Daly, and like I think 2 years ago he was doing really, really well, and then in the finals where like he didn't even make the finals, like he had just bombed, and I was like, and I remember sitting as a spectator, I just sit there just going, what? Like I got myself so worked up about him winning, and it's like, and then what happened?
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and I've never understood that, because I guess in my head, this perfect head, like, you know, that the dialogue is always like, well, they're so disciplined, they're so great, they're just going to be consistent all the way. And then like sometimes life decides to deal you a whole different, you know.
It's diving is funny. Diving, there's a lot of sports, you know, diving, gymnastics, figure skating. It's all sort of the same in that like the situation is always the same.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a diving board that is exactly the same height going into water that's always water, you know?
Yeah.
You're doing the exact same dives you practiced thousands of times. And somehow competitions still feel really different than practices do.
Yeah.
There's this sort of anxiety mountain peak, right? And when you're on your way up, it's great. And then the moment you go over that peak, you get a little shaky and you get nervous and you start thinking about things that you normally don't. And you start, you know, sometimes I would see different things in dives than I normally did, even though like in training, you're laser focused on like picking up that one spot. Sometimes in a meet, all of a sudden you're seeing everything, and that's disorienting. So weird things happen when you're kind of trying to play at the peak of that anxiety mountain. And they certainly did for me. And so, yeah, you sometimes that really elevates people.
Sure.
Where, you know, it gives you that extra strength, that extra push to actually do your dives higher and better and faster. Sometimes it puts you in the zone, which is where it sort of, to me, it always, when I was lucky enough to be in the zone, it felt like it sort of refined my senses, and it gave me this like superhuman confidence that I didn't normally have. And sometimes it knocks you right out of the zone and makes you doubt whether you're even going to be able to make it to the end of the board without falling off.
Wow.
Yeah, that was always me when it came to diving, the second part.
Yeah.
I was so fearful, partly of heights, and just the idea of like hitting my head on the board, or like any of these things would just pop into my brain that like I could never get beyond that mental part of it. Really get beyond there.
Yeah, it's absolutely a mental sport. I know divers dealt with all different, like there's like a range of fun mental things to overcome with diving. Like there is that fear, and I do know people that were competing at the Olympics and still very afraid. I know people who
so like every time they go up to the board, they're like, oh my God, I'm gonna hurt myself, and they just push through and do it anyway.
Yeah. And I actually know people who so in diving, I guess as in a lot of things, a balk is when you start your approach and then you don't do the dive. I knew people who balked more than they went in practice. I knew people who would get up there and then something wouldn't feel right, or they would get nervous, or they would start to think of hitting their heads on the board or something like that, and they would not be able to kind of like follow through with the rest of the dive.
Wow.
More often than not. And then somehow they'd get into competition, and for them, that competition took them to exactly the right level for them, and they ended up doing really, really great dives. And so it's, you know, the the mental game, as with almost any sport
Sure.
probably, but the mental game of diving was honestly probably the hardest thing for me to master, even more than the physical game of diving.
When they talk about that, right, at that level, at Olympic levels, it's really a game of mental capacity and discipline, and can you quiet your mind and stay that laser focus on what it is that you've trained for and just do it.
Yeah. It's on the one hand, it's so simple, and honestly, so much of my career of my diving life was so simple. Like, you know exactly what you have to do.
Yeah.
You know exactly what the metrics are. You know exactly what you need to fix in order to get to a perfect 10. And all you've got to do is practice something a gazillion times and then just transfer it over to a competition. And while being simple, it was so difficult to actually do that. Yeah, I mean, and that's why it's a sport. That's why people watch it. Like, that's why I think people enjoy watching things like the Olympics, because they know that this is like kind of you competing in the biggest moment of your life.
Yeah, it's real drama in that sense. So you're at the Olympics. I've heard that it's pretty crazy in the Olympic Village. There's a lot of partying. There's a lot of things going on. What was your experience like there?
You know, that is the single question I've gotten the most.
Really?
Yeah. Of any, people find out I'm at the Olympics, and then somehow they find a way to ask about the partying at the Olympic Village, which
I used to love partying, so I'm always going to ask anything related to partying.
Yeah. So I would say there was some partying, but it was nowhere near what I think the media has made it out to be. I mean, I feel like I read articles that were like, there's like drugs falling from the sky and like sex in every room and no.
Well, and the crazy part is when I went to the Olympic Village, one of the things that this tour guide, or I can't remember who it was telling us is, so the Olympic Village goes through this many condoms and I was like, what?
That's so bizarre.
It was the weirdest, and because I never thought about it, and they're like, they go through about 2,000, blah, 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 and I'm like, wow, in 2 weeks, that. I was like,
I will. So I actually,
that's kind of like a weird stat to throw out there.
I actually brought back Olympic Village condoms as souvenirs for my friends.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That is amazing.
It was like our last day there, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do it. And I went to the polyclinic in the Olympic Village, and I went to the front desk, and I was like, do you have any condoms? And the lady just kind of like points to what, like, in my mind now was like a jacuzzi-sized wicker basket in the middle of the room.
Yep.
Just full of condoms. And I hadn't brought anything to carry them with. So I was like, do you have a bag? And she gave me this sort of plastic shopping bag, and I just like shoveled condoms in and went on my way.
No eyebrows were raised.
None whatsoever. They had probably seen weirder things over the course of the 2 weeks. But anyway, on the one hand, people are there for what is the biggest moment of their careers. Yep. They have been training, laser focused for years and years and years for that moment. And you're not going to do anything to mess that up. Yeah. Like, you're going to, live exactly the right life to put you exactly where you want to be in your sport. And I think for the most part, like, that was kind of the feeling of it. Once you've done your competition, and you might still be living in the Olympic Village for the next week and a half or week, that was when I think... maybe a little bit more of like then you're like in the best shape of your life. You're surrounded at like this fun summer camp with everybody else who's the best shape of their lives, and you're having fun.
You've kind of done the thing you came to do that you've been so focused on. It makes sense that people would kind of like let their hair down a little bit. But also, like, there was no alcohol in the Olympic Village. And so actually the people that really wanted to let their hair down got apartments outside the village. Gotcha.
But there was some of that. It's funny. There's a McDonald's in the cafeteria, and like at the very beginning, the line was nothing, and by the very end, the line was like out the door for the McDonald's.
That's awesome.
Because like everyone had done what they came to do and was ready for French fries.
Yeah.
Cool.
That's so cool. So because I don't know, how did you actually do at the Olympics?
I got 7th at the
Cool.
Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
And it was awesome. It was like, you know, for me, like wanting to go since I was a child, like watching the Olympics, like organizing my life in 4-year increments around like where am I going to be in this next Olympics. There's so much hype. Like nobody cares about diving outside of the Olympics. Nobody watches you. Like we have a big international meet in the U.S. every year, and it's usually like it's like parents and sometimes friends in the stands watching it. And so to be able to do what I do and to do what I had trained my life for, suddenly on this platform with like the world watching, so cool. And I think kind of took that whole experience to this amazing kind of high, crazy level that I never really had experienced before and probably never will exactly in that way again. The Olympics themselves, like the experience of kind of being on the diving board and, feeling like the rough, like green board under my feet and like hearing the sound of sort of the pool filter and the sprinklers and like, diving pools are sort of notoriously like echoey. So hearing that, like I can still hear it. I can hear it right now. And being able to have that moment was awesome. So at the Olympics and the Olympic trials, I think I mentioned that sort of the mental aspect was really hard for me. And I had actually been training with a sports psychologist. And so I had this super specific game plan going into it. I listened to the exact same song between every dive of the prelims, the semifinals, and the finals. Yeah. Sail by AWOL Nation.
Okay.
Which I had a breathing plan. So basically in the prelims, there's about 30 people or so. In the semifinals, they cut down to 18, and in the finals, there's 12. So 30 people in between you, you're laying low for at least 15 minutes between each dive, which is a lot of time if you happen to have a brain that's prone to thinking about weird things during competitions. And so I would do my dive. I would dry off, talk to my coach, go back to like this place wherever I was sitting, put my headphones on, wrap myself in a towel and a parka, lie down, close my eyes, and breathe. What did I breathe? I think I breathed in 4 counts, held for 4, breathed out 4 counts, held for 4, to AWOL Nation between every turn.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was weird. It was something I had not, before Olympic trials of that year, I had not even kind of considered a plan like that, and it actually worked really well in sort of meditating. Basically.
You manage anxiety, you quiet all the noise.
Yeah. So it was a period of quieting the noise, and then maybe like 5 minutes before my turn, like getting up, jumping around, going. I was always I run cold. I was always cold-blooded. So taking a hot shower, jumping into the hot tub, taking another hot shower, jumping into the hot tub, talking to my coach. And then going again. And that was my way of sort of, putting my brain on hold during those times in between, and then getting up and getting ready to go.
So you compete now with the Olympics. You've done well. I mean, we're sitting in the presence of someone who was literally in the single digits at the top of the world. That's so amazing.
Thanks.
Okay, so you do the Olympics, you come back. I've heard many, many stories of Olympians who they actually fall into depression afterwards because it's you have this singular focus. What happened for you after this? Because you were actually working and doing all, you had a job, you were training and this and that. What was that like?
Yeah, it's interesting. In a lot of ways, I was about as set up for post-Olympic success as anyone could be. Cool. I had been working. I had tried so hard not to make my life a laser focused thing. I had a Stanford education. I had chosen to leave, where so many other athletes are taken out of their sports, not by their choice, but because they're injured or because they're cut from a team. So I had all of these things going for me, and it was still really hard.
Wow.
It was funny. I had basically like 1 year after the Olympics that I call my vagabond year. That was just like experiencing all of the stuff that I hadn't experienced while I was on like a pretty crazy training and work schedule.
Burning Man.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, no, I'm kidding.
It was
Festival tour.
Yeah. It was like,
Coachella. All the
Yeah.
things that you couldn't do. Anyway.
yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was music festivals. It was like I went skiing, which I couldn't do because like
Injury.
I cannot even tell you what my coach would have said to me if I had somehow hurt myself doing something that wasn't diving.
Yeah.
You know, I moved from the Bay Area to Pittsburgh to be at home for a little bit, and then I moved to New York, which I had been sort of eyeing from a distance as some place that looked really cool for a long time. I was on a TV show for teaching celebrities how to dive.
I remember that show.
Do you really?
I just don't know. I didn't know you were on it.
I was on it.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, you can see me lurking in the background of almost every episode.
That is so cool. Yes, and that's amazing.
What show was it?
It was called Splashed.
Splashed.
It was on ABC.
Very cool.
And my 3 people that I was teaching were Brandi Chastain, the soccer player. You guys know she was like famous for taking her shirt. Yeah. She was awesome. She was so athletic and like probably the most like nerdily athletic person I've ever met. Like
Amazing.
her like she was like cheering for everyone. It was so fun. And then I had Nicole Eggert, who was on Baywatch and Charles in Charge, and sort of her trajectory was that she had obviously been in the spotlight when she was younger. Fast forward 10 years, and she is a mom, and she's maybe gained a little bit of weight. And so I worked with her and taught her to dive. And then the other one was Chewy from Chelsea Lately, who was awesome, who like unfortunately passed away just recently. But he was, I actually got to day 1 of the show and learned that he didn't know how to swim. So, fast fact, I have taught exactly 1 person to swim in my life, and it's Chewy from Chelsea Lately.
That is amazing.
So that experience was amazing, and obviously like using my diving in a totally different way.
But also is transferring your joy of it, because it wasn't this yearning to compete or reclaim something, because you had done so much with it, is you were able to share that. And probably with people who are terrified of heights and
Yeah.
the board.
Yeah, that is. I admire just that. Like that was one thing I was never going to be a good athlete at, was just the heights and the diving and.
Yeah, and they were. I mean, and you think of like Chewy especially. He didn't know. He was afraid of water. He genuinely didn't know how to swim. And he signed up for the show for whatever reason. Probably both to learn how to swim and get that experience.
You're on TV.
Yeah.
All that.
But being able to help him with this genuine fear he had, and he was so funny. He was like a total performer, and so we would be doing. Ultimately, I got him off the diving board, and he ended up falling off and landing on his head. Off of 3 meters. So he would do that. And
Wow.
he would go down and he'd paddle to the surface. And the first thing you saw was like pure terror.
Yeah.
And then he'd get 1 breath and then he'd be joking again. And he was such a good, like watching him combine that like genuine emotion and fear, but also like do the job that he came to do and be a comedian. It was very cool.
It's so amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were on Splat. That is so cool. I'm going on YouTube. Anyway, okay, so you do that.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
So I did that.
A year was that?
It was about a year. It was a little less than a year. And so I did Splash for maybe 6 months. I went home to Pittsburgh where I decided I had kind of wanted to be a writer, but at that point I didn't really know what to write. And so I kind of went home to Pittsburgh and did everything but writing. Like I took a lot of fun fitness classes and I like journaled a bit. And then I moved to New York, and I knew that I wanted to do a job that involved words and ideas. Okay. I knew that I wanted to be in New York. Yeah. I did not know anything else. And so I was able to, I went on like 15 or 20 informational interviews in a week. And
cool.
It was very cool. It was super fun. I talked to like everyone I could find who did anything involving words and ideas. So I talked to people in publishing, in journalism, in advertising, in corporate communications, and just like cast a wide net. And I found myself really drawn to advertising strategy. So in advertising, there's sort of the creatives and the copywriters and the designers who are coming up with the big creative ideas, and there's the account team who's keeping the ship running, very Mad Men style. And then in the middle, there's this role called planner. And those are the people that sort of bring the voice of the consumer into the process. And so my role was to essentially kind of take what the account team was saying, which was usually like sort of dry and business-like, and infuse the role of the consumer in some creativity and make that into the perfect brief for the creative team to inspire them to create something really cool.
Cool.
And so I started doing that at a PR agency and then moved on to an ad agency. And it was hard and I was terrible at it.
Wow. Okay.
And I think, I started at an internship.
Sure.
I was 27. My fellow interns were 19 or like 20. And I've always been, I think, good with words. Like I had a creative writing degree and an English major from Stanford. I'd been sort of dabbling with writing all along, and it was like a different language. It was like, it was so hard to kind of come into this working world and expect and want to find something that I felt as good at as I did diving, and just be like really starting from scratch
again.
Yeah. Like I remember when I first got to advertising, I was working on Tide detergent.
Okay.
And in advertising, a commercial is called a spot.
Yeah.
I thought that spot was their internal logo or lingo for commercial, because in Tide ads, there's always a spot that has to come out, right? So it's stuff like that was just like everyone was speaking a language that I didn't feel like I spoke. Everyone seemed to know what was going on in a way that like I didn't.
Yeah.
I had sort of come from this life that was very simple and very obvious. It's like, you know what a 10 is, you know what a perfect dive is. You have a coach that's yelling at you from the side of the pool to tell you exactly when you've failed and when you've succeeded and what you need to do next.
Okay.
And then getting into the working world where I felt, number one, like not kind of aware of kind of the language and the lingo. And number two, like I didn't know what was right. I didn't know what was good. I didn't know what was bad. I like didn't want to be a burden on other people, but I also like missed having like some sort of coach that would tell me exactly what was going on. And that was really hard.
You know, what's really interesting though, and I run into this in the regular world, it's in general, we as a society though are not great at introducing people to new things. I think, and companies pay people big money to do that. Like Jesse and I work at this one space, and you can always tell the person that's never been there before, and no one ever bothers to be like, great, hi, welcome. It's everyone just does their own thing, and it's
I do that.
And no, but it's also the simple things of this is where the bathroom is, this is where the towels are kept, this is where this is where someone can change, this is where the shower is, and you can see that. And so I listen to that because even in big large companies, very few people take the time people can't be bothered to onboard people anymore. It's like when we're talking about this is what it is. This is what this is. And we forget that people never learn to run until they learn to crawl.
Totally.
There's also the concept of like managing up, which I always thought was so weird, but like you literally have to kind of tell your manager in a lot of cases what you need and what's going on and things like that, because they won't know otherwise. Whereas I feel like with a coaching scenario, the coach is like maybe not looking so much for feedback from you, but like showing you exactly what you need to
100%. Yeah. And my coach, Rick, is this, he's from Boston, so he has very, very strong Boston accent.
Amazing.
Very intense, like, you know, focused, driven. Like, think of any kind of sports movie that you've ever seen, and then think of that, like, you know,
Quintessential,
like, kind of gruff coach with a heart of gold.
Yeah.
And that's Rick. But Rick had a philosophy where his job was to help me be as successful as possible, and that meant anything that he needed. So, you know, he would coach me like kind of on the mechanics of my dives, but he also was my mental coach. He also would, you know, point it out if it seemed like I might be like, you know, focusing a little too much on stuff outside of the pool.
Sure.
His job was to do whatever it took to help me reach the goals that we had set together. And so totally, like, he basically created the world so that I could really focus on sort of the minute kind of physical and like mechanical changes I was trying to make in my dives, which is a world different than kind of managing up, like, and in the workplace being able to kind of recognize and advocate and ask for what you think you need.
So when you were there, so that you're not there anymore.
So it's funny. I'm no longer at the same place, but I'm actually in sort of the same field, and I have actually, like, over, when was the 2012? Over the last like 7 years or so, I've gotten better at it, so that's good. But
Excuse me.
But yeah, it was. I still remember how, like, literally like a fish out of water, like a diver out of water. I felt when I first started.
Yeah, I bet that transition. And you mentioned when we were talking offline that you were thinking of writing a book now. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I am, yeah. So I think there's a lot that is said about kind of the determination and grit and like kind of lifestyle it takes to get to the Olympics.
Yep.
I would love to write a book about what athletes do after they retire. Because I think that that is actually a time when you have to kind of exhibit even more strength in sort of, you know, you were at the top of the world at something. You were trying to be the best in the world at something. And then all of a sudden you don't have that anymore. You don't have that identity. You don't have that coaching. You don't have that lifestyle. Everything that you were training for is over, and now you have to figure out what your next life is. And I think that's probably a super interesting time in people's lives. Like I said, like, I had it good. You know, I had an idea that there was going to be a life after diving, and I was excited about it. But I think a lot of people kind of get thrown into that, and they're not ready, and they aren't prepared, and they aren't even thinking about it. And I think just watching people apply all of those skills that they learn as athletes into something else is really interesting. Like, I feel like, yeah, I feel like I've met, you know, I know people who have kind of hit the ground running and just like, they have this momentum that comes out of the Olympics and they keep it going in whatever direction.
Rippon.
Yeah, exactly. And then there are people that really kind of get stopped. And, you know, I think, for example, like Michael Phelps has been super open about sort of, you know, mental health and kind of that feeling of when the rug gets pulled out from under you.
What do you do?
What do you do? And how do you prepare for like life as a civilian almost after your focused, single-minded training life?
I think of Tom Brady because I've been watching him like first came the book. I'm like, maybe he's thinking about retirement. Like, now I see that he's got like franchise gyms opening up, and he's still playing, and that there's controversy around whether or not he's going to, you know, play another season or retire, or what team he's going to be on. But you can see him like planting these building blocks, you know, for the inevitable. And it seems, I mean, granted, if you get injured or something like that, there's nothing you could do. But like, if you can see the kind of that your career has run its course, even then it can be so hard for an athlete to kind of let go.
100%.
Like, the examples of that are, you know, so many of the athletes you see that kind of go beyond their prime.
Yeah.
But can't let go.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus it's Tom Brady, you know, he's been so successful, like, and, you know, clearly he's sort of setting up the building blocks so that he can continue to be. I think of people who nobody knows their names, you know,
Exactly.
who worked, who put their entire lives into making one or more Olympic teams. And then, they don't have that sort of wealth and counseling and brand and whoever is sort of helping him to kind of wrap his mind around what happens next. There's a lot of people that don't have that. And I think they're very surprised by it.
Right. So then what do you do? Because you're not falling back on your brand. You're really forging a new life where someone might not even recognize the accomplishments that you've gained or the achievements you've done. But you still have to live life. Life doesn't end when your career ends.
Right.
So that makes me want to ask a question. So, for instance, you have an idea to start a book and to write a book, but you just also said that, you know, I had a coach, you know, who pushed me and his job was to help me achieve these dreams, etc. And then we talk about, you know, these celebrities that have teams behind them that help get them into the right positions, let's say, as if they're affluent enough or whatever it is, to actually start striving for these goals. My question is, do athletes, Olympians, do these individuals are there services or people out there who actually help get them to the next point? Does the Olympic Committee have that type of support so that people can then start understanding? Because as an Olympian or even a sports person, you are so accustomed to having people pushing you and telling you, and yes, you have this single focus that is for yourself, but you know, there are these individuals, like I always wonder, like, well, what happens after that?
Yeah.
You could be highly decorated. Like I always wondered personally, like Adam Rippon had an incredible journey and came out of it as a media sweetheart or whatever it is, and now has a YouTube channel and all of these things and all these. What happened to Michelle Kwan, who's probably one of our most decorated, you know, ice skaters around, who didn't particularly win gold, whatever it is, but has had so much success on both the national and international levels.
Yeah.
You know, there are these, you know, I wonder what is Greg Louganis doing today? You know, you know, and there's.
I worked with him on the show too.
I know.
Yeah.
Which is why I was a huge fan. Like,
yeah.
I was the kid in, you know, Hawaii who, when his Breaking the Surface came out, I bought a book, I mailed it to him with $20 and asked him to autograph it.
Gosh.
And then he mailed it back. And all he did was autograph it. And I was pissed. I was like, but I know what, you know, in today's world is I know what probably happened is some person just sent this, just sign it. And, you know, and got mailed back to me. But I was just glad that I got it back. But again, it's like, you think about all these things. Yeah. You know, and is that a support thing that these Olympians and people need?
Yes. Yeah. And I there are services, and particularly when it comes to sort of careers, like the USOC will help.
Okay, that's good.
I think that the challenges are so broad and so far reaching that there could certainly be more as well. And it's like, I think of my own story where like I spent like a year after the Olympics being like, this is amazing. I'm experiencing all these great things. Like I'm exploring. And then it was the following year that I was really like, whoa, who am I?
Yeah.
Like, you know, am I ever going to be as good at anything as I was at diving? Like, have I peaked? Like, it's like those kinds of questions actually took a while for me to start having. And I think there's such a range of mindsets and of challenges and of sort of like directions for people's next lives that I think there's more that we can do to help people after their careers.
So your book would be about...
My book would be...
in your idea...
So this is early stages.
Okay.
And this, you have permission to change this.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah, I needed a caveat. But no, I want to interview other Olympians.
Cool.
And learn about what their experiences were like after their Olympic careers or athletic careers were over. And I would like to write biographies and kind of really understand from them, like, what were the challenges they faced? Both, what are the sort of positive skills they really were able to pull from their athletic endeavors and kind of channel into something else, and kind of what also were sort of the doubts and the scary moments and the, like, will I ever be successful again type moments that come with that as well. Because I think, it's like even Tom Brady, he can set up the best possible life and career for himself afterwards, but there is still going to be a moment when he cannot feel the feeling of
running out on the field
and being in a game anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, for me, there's a moment when I cannot feel the feeling of, like, bouncing on the diving board and going into the water with no splash in a way that I've trained gazillions of times. And I think that is just such an interesting thing to talk to people about and a thing to kind of use and move on from, that I'm really excited to explore it.
Yeah, I think that's it. Everyone we've spoken with so far doing this podcast with The Journey, and we had talked about this, like, your story doesn't contain any kind of illness or death or any kind of, like, tragedy, if you want to think about it that way, but, like, challenge, or it does have its challenges, but the point I'm trying to get to is that, like, we're talking about a journey that's not predicated around an experience of loss in any way, and then, like, what's life like afterwards. It's really just about the journey of becoming, at the highest level, and having so much of your life surrounding that, and then what do you do once that's finished, right? And it's surprisingly analogous to all the other stories, and I think maybe we're uncovering more about just, like, what the essence of the journey really is, which is just a series of chapters in our life, and that those chapters start and they end, and how do we transition gracefully from one chapter to the next, and not just say, this is chapter 5, this is my life, and this is the only thing that I have to hang on to, but say, okay, that was a great part of my life, but, like, what's the next thing, and how do I continue to thrive after, these experiences that we have. And
I love that. I just got chills while you were talking about
Exactly.
that. That's awesome. But yeah, it's so true. And I think for Olympians, like, you see one chapter of their lives.
Yes.
And I'm super excited to explore the next chapters.
very cool. Awesome.
Okay, so I have one question.
Yeah.
When are you doing it?
When
Because I want to read it.
Okay, so
Don't say it, because then every single week he's gonna be checking in with you, asking you.
Actually, probably exactly what I need
But
right
see,
now.
but
He's
this
gonna
is
be your
how
new
this
coach.
started.
Perfect. Yeah.
He's gonna be
This
your
is
new
how
coach.
it started. He had an idea about the Journey NYC podcast, and I was like, okay, that's cool.
Whenever
so how
he
many
asks
mics
me
do
for
we need?
Timelines.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, I don't know, and like, we'll see.
I know. Anthony,
But we get lots done.
Yes. We would not get anything done for you, so I can acknowledge that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
No, I know. I think I need a you in my life. I think, like,
I'm already in your life.
Yeah, this is okay. So
Yes.
So I had this idea, and we talked about this idea like a year ago.
Okay.
And we went to this, awesome
Workshop.
and that was the first time that I was like, wow, like, this is a story that I'm really excited to learn more about. I want to kind of, like, develop my own story, and I want to, like, interview a lot of other people and learn about theirs. And then over the past year, I have done almost none of it.
Okay.
It has been so hard to figure out how to find the time and how to make the time to do it. And so I actually just this week decided to take a 2-month sabbatical from work.
Amazing.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
And I'm going to use that time to explore this project and give it the attention that I feel like it deserves.
And Ant will be calling you tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. to check in on that.
Highly likely. But this is the one thing that I will give to you. When it comes down to asking people to share their stories, we've had many people that we've booked and then they've canceled, or have literally said, I'm not able to be that vulnerable right now. But for some reason today, in a 2-hour window, which is really what we asked you for, you were able to share your story. Like that's and it's over coffee.
I came very close to canceling.
I'm sure you
there
did.
There was a moment. So on Monday of this week,
Mm-hmm.
I was when I went in and I talked to my bosses who are awesome,
Mm-hmm.
and was like, "This is something that is important to me that I want to pursue." And I was, and then they said yes, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh, I need to actually figure out what this thing is, and maybe I should push this podcast back a couple months until I have a better sense of the book and I know exactly what kind of platform I want to push." And I like had started typing the email to you, and then honestly, from
And
the
then
moment
on Tuesday, I sent you a confirmation.
yeah,
I'm super excited to talk to you.
yeah, and so honestly, as I, once I put it out there that I was going to do this, you put things out into the universe, and the universe sort of starts to feed you things. And so I have had so many conversations with people about this idea, about sort of my trajectory and how it has led me to come to this idea. And that was sort of what helped me to feel prepared to come and talk to you guys for an hour or two about this today. So it's super scary to not know what the next 2 months or after that are going to be like. But I really appreciate that you asked me to be on this and gave me the opportunity to have to tell my story.
Well, this I think is interesting too, because this is literally the journey right now that you're going on. And we don't have we have a lot of people that have had that continue on their journey, but I think for you is like you're at the start of it, this other journey.
It feels that way.
Yeah.
Which is really
Started
nice,
something new.
because if there's anything that I would tell you from my own perspective is literally it's just having coffee with people. And you're literally people want to be understood, I think, and people want to share. The nice part is, like, for us is this is a podcast. It's a live thing that gets recorded. But for your book it literally is that you want to understand what their journey has been like.
Yeah.
And through that process, as this exchange has happened, is you garner hopefully something from us, of things that will take you through the following steps of your journey, and they will garner from you.
Yeah.
And in conversation.
Yeah. I love that, like chapter 9, having coffee with people.
Exactly.
It's like, I feel like I'm starting something new, and I'm excited that you guys are here to help me kick it off.
Well, and the great part is, like, we can literally keep coming back to this. Like, we also, part of our original plan was to revisit people and say, well, what do you think life is going to be like in 5 years? Is for you, it's literally, I'm excited to hear what's this going to be like in 2 months. How many people have you talked to? And if that's
He's
what
already
this,
working
I know.
on it.
like, this is amazing.
I know.
follow-up
I'm
questions
nervous
for
about
you.
this,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I think it's necessary.
So
Yeah.
exciting. It's like
Yeah.
in the next week, she could have 2 coffee dates, and it's like have some really incredible stories to tell.
I love it. Well, it's been such a pleasure having you on and learning about your journey. And thank you so much for sharing it with us. And definitely really excited to hear more about this book and the next chapters.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put it out there. Cassidy, we're looking forward to talking to you again, and hearing about what the continued journey is like. But again, to all of our viewers and our listeners, this is episode 7
Yes.
of the Journey NYC podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Anthony and
Jesse.
and Cassidy Krug. Thank you so much for being a guest today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you both. This has been awesome. It's been cool and kind of cathartic and really helpful to be able to talk about my story with you guys.
Cool.
Right on. Awesome. Thanks, guys.